I started late from my office, so I was in a real hurry that evening. My husband was in California for a business trip. Hence, I planned to spend the weekend on my own. I checked quickly to the nearby departmental store and bought snacks and a bottle of wine to relax after getting home. It was 8 o'clock already. Though my house is of 15 minutes walk from my office, I wanted to get a cab anyway. There are not many houses in these suburbs, so walking alone, even for 5 minutes at night, gets quite uncomfortable sometimes. I was just about to leave the store when I noticed the last cab leaving the stand. I blamed myself for taking too long to shop. There was no other way than to walk. I came out of the store and looked up to the black starry sky for a minute. Taking the shopping bag in the left hand, I began the tedious walk. The silence around me made me hear my own footsteps loud and clear. The road was straight and wide and completely empty. The streetlights were scattered throughout the way. It was a walk amidst light and shadow. After walking for 5 minutes, I thought to shift the bag to my opposite hand. As soon as I turned right, I spotted a shadow behind me. All this time, I noticed no one else, hence, this sudden presence of someone else startled me. I turned around and saw a weird guy walking slowly behind me. There was no doubt that this guy was a homeless man. He was wearing a knit cap that made it impossible to see his face. His shirt and trousers were torn off in many places. A very stinky smell was coming from him, which signified he hadn't bathed in a long time. His head was shaking to the ground, and from his body language, I could tell he was heavily drunk. I didn't bother and kept walking. 5 minutes went away, but that guy was still walking behind me. He didn't pick up his pace or try to surpass me. He just kept walking behind me, taking slow and small steps. I started walking a bit faster and decided to take a shorter route besides the nearby kids' park. Somehow, I reached the end of the road and turned right to head for the park. For a second, I turned back to check out that guy. He was still walking in the same manner, except for this time, I noticed his wide hands and the color of my face turned pale. There were drops of blood on his hands. It seemed like someone scorched the skin out of his hand, making the blood gush out of his flesh. A sound of chuckling came from his mouth. I still couldn't see his face. Terrified and shocked, I ran towards home. This time, the man picked up his pace and started to run behind me, making that obscene, spine-chilling laughter. The more I ran, I heard his chuckles turning into mad cries. His behavior implied that my fear was entertaining him immensely. I was panting and perspiring even on that chilly winter night. As I managed to cross the park, I noticed the porch light of my house within a distance of 10 to 15 feet. I bashed myself on the front door of my house. I took out the key under the doormat quickly. My hands were trembling, yet I managed to open the door and slammed it hard after entering the house. I locked it immediately and locked all the windows in the back door as well. My heart was racing like a wildfire. It took me 5 to 10 minutes to breathe normally again. After a while, when I realized there was no sign of that guy or his horrifying laughter, I peeked through the curtains of my living room. The streetlights made the area clearly visible. I looked everywhere. A sense of fear was still inside me. There was no one outside as far as my eyes went. I felt relief. I went to the kitchen and had a glass of water. Things got back to being normal again, but soon I realized it was only for half an hour. What happened next changed my entire experience with life. I sat down to watch a movie, pouring myself a glass of wine. The movie was going well. Just then, I heard a low thud. The sound was like a knock on a glass window. I followed the thudding sound to find out where it was coming from. I checked all the windows of my house, but couldn't find anything. As I started to walk upstairs, I heard a squawking sound coming from the attic. I guessed it could be the attic mouse. I grabbed a torch and went up the attic ladder to check. The attic was dark and dingy. It was filled with a bunch of old furniture in cardboard boxes. We used the attic just like a storeroom. I moved around the flashlight, but nothing unusual caught my eye. The sound also stopped the moment I turned on the flashlight. I thought it was my tired head imagining everything. I headed for the ladder to get down and go to bed. As I took the first step, that squawking sound began again. My ears followed the direction of the sound. I had no doubt this time that it was coming from my little attic glass shed. I flashed the light onto the sound. I was a bit drunk, so it took me a second to figure out. But when I did, my heart flunked to my throat. It was him, the homeless man. He was leaning over the attic glass window. As he knocked the glass with his long, dirty nails, the squawking sound came out again. His face was full of scars. I could see clotted blood all over his face. He started to scratch the skin with his filthy nails. I was standing there, numb. I didn't know how to react. He was looking directly at me. His inhuman stare made me feel like he almost licked my soul with his bloody tongue. He started to laugh like a maniac, then started to tear his own skin with his long, sharp nails. He continued his malevolent laughter by spitting blood all over the attic window. I wanted to run away from my own house, but I knew the way I will be safe is to stay inside the house. The man didn't just stop there. He started to eat his skin after scrubbing it off. I could almost hear him chewing on his own flesh. I felt like I am going to faint. There was nothing more vicious I have ever experienced in my life than watching him doing these insane things to his own self. Suddenly, I heard the phone ringing downstairs. I ran immediately and picked it up. It was my husband. I told him there's a maniac on our roof. He immediately called 911 for me. My mother, who lives 3 houses away, rushed to my house after hearing everything from him over a followed phone call. I was sobbing and walking around the house after being scared like hell. My eyes went onto every window, thinking maybe now that devil will break in. I waited, sitting in the corner of my living room for my mother, shivering, sweating, heavily breathing and gasping. After 5 minutes of waiting, which felt like a long 5 hours, my mom arrived. Just when my mom's car pulled into our driveway, I heard a loud thud as if someone jumped from a high place to the ground. Then I heard sounds of running footsteps. My mother stayed with me until my husband came back. I couldn't sleep that night at all. My mom said I had several nightmares and murmured in my sleep. The police came and searched the entire locality, but they found no one. 2 days later, local news flashed that Atlanta police have arrested a meth addict, rapist, who recently broke from prison. The guy had murdered 3 young girls after abducting them from an empty road. Due to heavy drug problems, he has been put under strict watch to keep him away from availing any kind of drug. He was so violent and highly addicted that he scratched his own arms and legs for not getting drugs. The TV channel also flashed his face. The image they showed was of a mutilated-faced man. He was wearing the same knit cap and shirt and trousers. I couldn't make out his face, but his spine-chilling smile remained the same. I still can't figure out how he climbed up the roof. It's even more terrifying to think that he might have spied and waited for a while to figure out I was alone in my house. The impact of the incident left me in terrible shock. I couldn't walk alone at night for almost a month. I am still afraid to be alone in my own house. My husband has put up a high security alarm in our house. Even then, when he goes abroad for office work, I go to stay with my mother, or sometimes she comes to stay with me. Wherever that man is, I pray to God that we never, ever meet again. Those were my graduation years. I rented a place with one of my batchmates. The place was 10 minutes away from our college campus. I was a student of journalism, so most of our classes used to revolve around field experience. We had to cover a lot of places for reporting, taking interviews, etc. Thus, after a pretty busy and tiresome week, the weekends were our only relaxation. Saturday night, I used to dine out with my friends. We often stayed out late on weekends. The area we stayed was safe, and we never faced any trouble, no matter how late we arrived home. My mom often called saying girls shouldn't stay out so late at night, but I and my roommate knew the area so well that we had nothing to be worried about. It was winter. The trees on the street shed all the leaves, making the area look quite spooky at night. Due to the cold, there were very few people on the road after dark. The week was tiresome as we had a bunch of projects. Hence, the following week, I was dying to go out and chill for some time with my friends. I and my roommate decided to go out Saturday night as both of us were too tired to cook at home. There was a place 2 to 3 blocks from our campus that served real good Chinese. We went there. There were only a handful of people in the restaurant. I was surprised to see this place less crowded. My roommate read my thoughts and said, "Everyone went to see their relatives this weekend, I suppose. Also, the cold is too much for people to go out these days." I agreed with her because even after wearing a thick leather jacket with gloves and cap, I was still shaking. We sat down at the table near the fireplace. The waiter knew us very well, so he came to us with a smile on his face and said, "Having fun this weekend, girls?" I smiled back and nodded my head, saying yes. We then ordered our food, and the waiter poured us 2 glasses of wine to warm ourselves up. Since childhood, I have been quite an observer. Wherever I go, even if I don't pay much attention, I always end up observing every little detail around me. Because of this habit, I have encountered weird things about people or places many times, but never did it bother me for life until this moment. We were chatting to pass the time until the food arrives. Needless to say, we were really hungry. My roommate was complaining, saying it takes longer for the food to arrive just when my eyes went to the corner of the restaurant. I saw a weird woman sitting at the left corner table. She was looking at the fork stand lifelessly. Her hair was all messy. Clothes were damp and dusted. Her boots were filled with mud and seemed really old as they lost the shine. She looked really creepy with her wrinkled face and wide, pale eyes. She had long fingers with dirt-filled nails. I hardly judge people, but her wrinkled clothes with dark spots on them definitely indicated her poor lifestyle. She just kept staring at the forks and then took one out of the stand. She didn't look at me once all this time, as I couldn't help but notice her. Suddenly, she picked a paper napkin from the table and started tearing it with a dinner fork for no reason. The way she was destroying them appeared a bit violent to me. After 5 minutes, our food came. As I already said, I was feeling really hungry, so I decided to ignore her and concentrated on my food. My roommate and I kept eating, and eventually, I stopped noticing her. 10 minutes passed when I noticed the same waiter bringing food to that woman's table. My eyes again went to her. I saw her food plate. She ordered chicken wings tossed in some spicy sauce. I don't know if you all think of me as a judgmental person, but trust me, guys, I have never seen anyone eating in such an unusual manner. Her eating method almost creeped me to the core. I saw her grabbing 2 to 3 chicken wings at a time and shoving them into her mouth. She was eating like she hasn't eaten for a very long time. The spicy sauce was all over her fingers. The red sauce got smeared all over her lips and chin. This made her mouth look even creepier than before. Her eyes were on her food all this time, but suddenly she looked up and our eyes met. I felt someone poured buckets of ice into my stomach and my entire body froze within a second. Her huge pale eyes were directly fixed at me. She didn't move, didn't utter a single word, just kept staring lifelessly. Her face covered with red sauce seemed like a bloody nightmare. My roommate sat facing her back towards the woman, which is why she couldn't see any of this happening. I was feeling really uncomfortable, so I chose not to tell my roommate about her or any of it which was happening in front of my eyes. This uncomfortable situation resided for another 10 to 15 minutes. The woman finished the rest of the chicken wings, but her eyes were fixed at me. I can't explain how horrifying she looked. She kept eating her food, staring at me as if she was eating my soul. After she finished her meal, she wiped her dirty hands on her clothes even though there were paper napkins present at her table. She then stood up and took out the money from her worn-out handbag and left it on the table. I felt a bit relieved that she's finally gonna leave and I'll never have to see her again. But only if I knew. She started to walk towards the exit. I pretended to look at my phone as if all this time I wasn't even aware of her existence. Just when she was about to pass me, she stopped right behind my back. My heart paused. Drops of sweat started to run down my spine. I could sense her presence right behind me. My roommate was busy eating while talking to her boyfriend, so she didn't notice her at all. I realized The woman was standing behind me and watching my phone. I didn't have the guts to turn around. My fingers were all numb. I was just praying to God. Please make her walk away. Make her walk away. She stood behind me for 10 to 15 seconds, then giggled in a very disturbing voice and walked away. As soon as she left the restaurant, I calmed myself down. I managed to finish my food and told my roommate we must head back to our room right now. She was surprised for a bit, seeing me panting like that, but somehow I convinced her. We reached home as fast as we could. At some point, my roommate even asked me, why am I walking so fast? But I didn't stop for a second. Once I reached home, my roommate asked me if I was doing okay because I am behaving really weird. I dodged her questions and told her I'm just tired. I better go to bed. I entered my room and locked the door, and out of fear went to lock the windows as well. I don't know why I went to look out from my bedroom window. As I peered from my bedroom window, I saw her. She was there. She was standing in front of our house, looking right at my window. I was more than shocked and insanely terrified. I couldn't believe that she actually followed us to our house. I was out of words. She just stood there with the same lifeless stare and kept giggling. Suddenly, a sense of being alive shook me off, and I ran to my roommate's bedroom. I started banging her door as loud as I could. I cried, calling out her name. She opened the door, and I told her, there's some creepy woman standing in front of our house. She got out of the house, even though I told her not to. My roommate was brave enough, so she made a round around the property, just to be sure there weren't any mugshot or burglars stalking our house. But no trace was found of any living person all around the house. My roommate told me that the wine might have hit me a bit hard, and I have been spooked by a tree or shadow cast by a tree or something else. I knew what I saw, but I didn't argue anymore. I chose not to tell her about the incidents in the restaurant because I didn't want to freak out my roommate at that point. So we just locked all the doors and windows and went to sleep. The next morning, I told her everything, and she got scared too. We came home early after our classes for a week. Also, we didn't leave our house at night for 4 to 5 days. There was an unknown fear in our hearts for a long time. I am just glad that I never saw her again. We decided not to tell anyone about that creepy encounter, but often at night, I still wake up having nightmares of a giggling sound. Whoever you were, you weird, creepy woman, let's not meet ever again.
Two years ago, when I was 15, my parents decided to go visit my uncle. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay home and hang out with my best friend Alex. Since we live in a quiet neighborhood and there was little crime happening here, my parents allowed me to stay home and have Alex come over. My mom left me a note on the fridge with all emergency numbers, and my dad told me to call him if anything happens. I assured them that everything is going to be fine. Me and Alex were just going to play video games and have some pizza later. They both hugged me and left. I called Alex and he came to my house 15 minutes later. We played UFC on my PS4 for 2 hours and then had some pizza. After our meal, we just sat in my living room talking about random stuff. Eventually, we started talking about girls. We both had crushes on some older girls, but the girls didn't even know we existed. Alex mentioned a website where you could talk to random people called Omegle. He also said that he talked to some girls there, so we decided to go on Omegle and try our luck. The first 30 minutes, we didn't get matched with any girls, so we started to get bored. We started talking to them, but they were just typing. We could see that they were talking, but we couldn't hear them. We started talking to them, but they were just typing. We could see that they were talking, but we couldn't hear them. We told them to turn on their microphone, but the girls said that they don't have a microphone. We continued talking to them. We said that we were home alone, and so were they. They said that they lived in the same city and the same area as Alex and I, but we never saw them. After 15 more minutes, they said that we were cute and that we should hang out sometime. We were stunned. Girls usually didn't want to hang out with us, so Alex gave them his Snapchat username. As soon as he typed his username, the girls disconnected. We were really bummed out. We didn't even get their names. We were stunned. Girls usually didn't want to hang out with us, so Alex gave them his Snapchat username. As soon as he typed his username, the girls disconnected. When Alex took out his phone, he just received a snap message from someone called Anna XOXO99. He opened it and it was a picture of the two girls we met on Omegle earlier. They were walking on the street and the caption said, "Can we come over?" Alex immediately looked at me. He didn't ask me anything. I already knew what he wanted and I said no. They can't come to my house. He wasn't happy about this, but I said no every time he tried to make me let them come over. Alex texted them saying that they can't come and that we should hang out some other time. A couple of minutes later, the girls responded, "Can we meet at the park then?" Alex asked me if I wanted to go to the park. It was only 10 minutes of walking from my house, and I said no. He called me a pussy and said that he was going with or without me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I am a pussy. Am I going to pass on an opportunity like this? I looked at my watch. It was 10:30 p.m., so it wasn't that late, and my dad's friend lives right next to the park, so I thought it was okay. But if anything seemed strange, we would immediately go back to my place. Alex agreed. He sent the girls a snap saying that we were on our way to the park. They replayed the snap from Alex that we should meet and told us that they were waiting for us in the children's playground. We got out of my house and we started walking to the park. The whole walk there, I was thinking, what if something goes wrong? We don't even know these girls, and what if someone else was at the park with them? I didn't want to say anything to Alex because he would probably say that I was a pussy and that I'm paranoid, so I kept my thoughts to myself. After 10 minutes of walking, we got to the park. The children's playground was a little deep in the park, so I asked Alex to ask them to come to the main entrance of the park because we were already there. Alex just said, "Dude, come on," and texted them that we are in the park. A minute or so, we arrived at the playground. There was no one there. I asked Alex if they responded to our last snap, and he said no, they just left it on red. We waited there for a couple of minutes, but there was no sign of the girls. We were all alone in the park. I told Alex that they probably were just messing with us and that we should go home. But Alex wanted to stay a couple of minutes more. A minute passed and we heard someone walking behind us. We turned around and there was a guy dressed in black, standing behind a tree, looking at us, and he had a creepy smile on his face. I said to Alex that we should go home and that this wasn't a good idea. Alex agreed, and we started walking back home. The whole time, I was looking over my shoulder, trying to see if the man was following us, and he was. So I said to Alex to step up. Just when we got to the park's entrance, the guy grabbed my hand and started screaming in some insane way. I was screaming and kicking, trying to get him to let go of my hand. I was calling Alex to help me, but he ran away. The guy started pulling me back into the park. I was screaming as loud as I could, and that was when I saw blue and red lights. The guy must have seen them too because he immediately let go of my hand and ran deeper into the park. I started running back to the direction of my house when a police officer stopped me. I explained everything to him, and he called my parents. The police officer took me to the police station to wait for my parents to pick me up. My parents came after 1 hour, and the police told them what happened, and so did I. My dad asked them, did they catch the guy from the park? And they said they were still looking for him. When we got home, my parents were glad that nothing serious happened, but they were still mad because I left the house to meet some girls I was talking to online. They told us to go to sleep and that everything will be alright. The next day, Alex came to my house with his dad, and he apologized for running away last night. He also said that when he got home, he opened his Snapchat and there was no sign of Anna XOXO99.